Welcome to the GeoTrek podcast. I'm your host, Hurricane Hal. Today on the podcast, we're featuring insurance agent Carl Schneider, who is passionate about educating communities in disaster-prone areas on how to build better. Welcome back to the GeoTrek podcast. I'm your host, Hurricane Hal. I'm an extreme weather and disaster scientist with a passion for communication and education related to natural disasters. On the GeoTrek podcast, we explore the world to bring you stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. Our passion with this podcast is that you're better educated and prepared so that yourself, your family, and your community will not be blindsided by natural disasters. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That'll keep you up to date with everything going on here in the podcast, and your support of the podcast ensures many more episodes of the GeoTrek podcast in the future. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest. Carl Schneider is a close personal and professional friend. He's an insurance agent in Mobile, Alabama. He's also a co-founder and a board member of a nonprofit called Smart Home America. His passion is really construction science and educating communities and people on the importance of building better and really how to build better. You'll see in this podcast, he loves to get into how we build and really the principles behind it and the thought processes behind it as well. You're going to love this conversation with Carl, and it's going to get you thinking about the strength of the home you live in and why we build the way we build, and really the importance long-term of building better. It'll keep your family safer, and it'll actually save you money in the long run. Well, without further introduction, let's jump into this podcast interview with Carl Schneider. Carl, thank you so much for taking time to come on the GeoTrek podcast.
Thank you, Hal. Looking forward to this conversation. We've been needing to do it for a while.
Man, Carl, I've known you for a long time. You've opened my eyes so much to the importance of building better and thinking realistically about the risk we take. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations through the years, but what really moved me was your stories of how your eyes got open to a lot of these things. Walk us through how your eyes got open to the importance of building better.
Yeah. Well, Hal, as you know, background's insurance, but my passion, my love is construction. Building things have always been that way since a little child. And every home I've ever lived in, every business building I've ever been in, I've been a part of the construction of them. Back in 1997, a few years ago, my wife and I had some relatives come over from Switzerland and stay with us. And one of the relatives was a cousin who was an architect. And we're sitting out on the pier, and I asked the question, what do you think about American construction, our homes and our building? And he asked me, he said, can I tell you the truth without offending you? And I said, sure. He said, well, Americans build junk. It was a little bit more explicitive, but I said, why is that? And he said, well, for me to explain it, I really need you to come to Switzerland. So my wife and I, following year, went there, and my mouth fell open. I could not believe the quality of construction and the way that the Europeans build, both in Germany, Austria, Switzerland. They build their homes to last for centuries. And I was able to see how they built. Well, my background when I was in college was working in commercial construction, metal buildings, concrete factories, you name it. I was involved. So I knew what Americans, how they built, and I saw how the Europeans built, and they build with a purpose. Their communities are not mobile. One family, two family, three generations will live in one structure, and that's just.
And Carl, when you talk about they wanted to build for centuries, are they passing it down from one generation to the next?
Absolutely. Parents will live in the middle floor, the grandkids on the bottom floor, and the grandparents on top floor, or vice versa. And so they build their homes to survive. Switzerland, which is a small country geographically, it's third the size of the state of Alabama, and of that, half the country can't even be built on, and a large portion of it, believe it or not, is used for farming in Switzerland, a lot of cattle. So anyway, it was fun to see cattle's on the bottom floor coming out of the barn, and grandma and grandpa on the second or third floor. It was a neat cultural change. Europeans don't move. They don't buy and switch and move across country like Americans do. And property is very expensive, and the homes are mortgaged for 100 years. I mean, it's just a different culture, the way the society works. But the point was they built their homes to last. They built them with hurricane shutters on all the houses. The houses are solid concrete, reinforced, very energy efficient. And that blew me away, because the way Americans build is cheap. All we want to do is get as least expensive, as big as we can. We want mini mansions, but we don't want to have anything that makes them more resilient. It's just our cultures are different. And that, unfortunately, is why I got so heavily involved with mitigation and resiliency on construction, because it's the solution. And the slides that we'll see in a little bit will explain why. So when I came back from that trip, my wife and I put our first home on the market, wood frame, cheap construction. The house was infested with black mold. It about put me in the grave. And so the new house we built, I wanted it to be strong. I wanted it to be energy efficient, low maintenance, low cost. And I found back in 2001, no one knew how to build that way in our geographic area. So I took it upon my own, and I built my second home out of steel and concrete, steel studs, steel trusses, concrete walls. And it was a heck of a home. And everybody said, Carl, why do you spend so much money to build a steel and concrete house? And I said, no, it's not more expensive. It's less expensive. And it's that mentality. How could it be less expensive? Well, lower insurance costs, no maintenance on termites. The house was extremely energy efficient. I never had a hurricane claim, lived in the house over 21 years, had multiple hurricanes, and I'm right on the water. And knowing the insurance industry, I never had a problem with getting or keeping insurance in place. So in the long run, when you look at the ownership cost of a home, building stronger is less expensive. The houses are just much, much better. And that's
so, Carl, really the difference there is your perspective. If you're looking long-term versus short-term, it's actually cheaper to build better.
Correct. And that's proof. So that was in 01, 04 came along, 03, 2, 3, 4. We were watching the insurance industry change the way they rated homeowners and commercial property. Everything switched from how was the house built to what's your credit score this week. And the better your credit score and the crappier your house is built, the less expensive your insurance is. It made no sense whatsoever. And the insurance industry learned valuable mistakes that resiliency is more important than credit, but even though they use credit still to this day. So built the house, was in it 3 years. Ivan hit, working with the local code department. The insurance industry in Alabama was stable but injured. I worked with the local code departments, and I was amazed with the damage as a result of surge. Not flooding, but surge from the hurricane, from the flooding. And we saw a tremendous amount of collapsed building because of scour.
And this is from Hurricane Katrina in 2005 at this point. Or
this
still
was
from
2004. This was Hurricane Ivan that hit the Alabama-Florida state line. Florida, on the flip side, Pensacola was extremely damaged by the winds. They were on the right side of the storm, wrong side, the right side of the center of the storm. So they got the brunt of the damage. The Mobile area, we got hit, but not as hard. So we went back into the recovery, doing what we do as insurance agents, paying claims, taking care of clients. And then 11 months later, we hit Katrina. This time we were far enough away from the right side of the storm. We had damage, but it wasn't catastrophic. We got the phone calls in, and this will get into the story experiences that will explain why I do what I do. But what we found is Katrina was not only a wind event, but it was a surge event as well as a flood event. And if you'll pull up those photos, I'll explain why building stronger makes a difference. The one house that sits there in the middle of the debris, if you can pull that one up, the owner of that house right there is a gentleman, a structural engineer out of Pass Christian, Mississippi. His name's Scott Sundberg. I met him by reading an article on sailboats. How to find that? Well, he had written a story in the magazine called Morning of Terror on Afternoon Delight. Afternoon Delight was a sailboat. And he and his wife were in the process of building this home in Pass Christian. And if you'd see, the water is just to the bottom of that photo. And Scott and Carolyn were in their rental house. They were tired that summer of chasing or evacuating from storms, so they decided to stay in their rental home. And what ended up happening in the storm is the rental house exploded out from underneath them from surge. They ended up riding out the hurricane on their upside down sailboat called, it was actually, they were in it, flipped over, hit by a tree. Carolyn ended up surviving the storm in a tree, and Scott ended up crawling back on top of the upside down sailboat, and they both survived that storm. Well, their home that was under construction, which was just a half a mile away, was this home, and Scott knew to build it stronger. And that house is solid concrete. This is what I call the first real fortified test of construction. The water got up into the middle of the second floor windows. You'll see where they're broken out. Third floor, the house did have damage to it, substantial damage, but the house was a survivor. The little octagons to the south of it, those were condominiums. They were completely destroyed. And not only did the house survive the wind, it survived the surge, and it also survived the neighboring properties with the debris that was battering that house. If you'll show the castle or the next two slides on that, I'll walk you through those as well. But that area of Pass Christian got hit by over 30-foot tidal surge.
Yeah, and for context, that was the largest storm surge on record in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, this was a huge deal, very catastrophic, amazing that a structure could survive.
Yeah, go to the next one, you'll see what it looks like. So for this consumer to rebuild the home back after Katrina is very quick, very easy, and the insurance claim was very easy to settle. The middle of the second windows were all blown out by water surge. 30-foot wall of water in that house stood the test of nature. And if you go to the next video or photo, you'll see a picture of a castle. Right, there were what I call three successful survivors in the path of Katrina in Pass Christian. One was Scott, and this was a castle, a house that was built by an elderly gentleman and his granddaughter in the 1920s, and it's called the Pass Christian Castle. Yes, it had damage, but look at it. It survived. It was built board by board by board, bucket of cement at a time, and that is what that house looked like 6 months after Katrina. It was a survivor.
Carl, what is it about the three storm survivors that were different? Were they all out of concrete and steel? I mean, how did they build differently than all the homes that did not survive?
Strength, resiliency, foundation. There's a little Bible verse about building on sand, having a solid foundation, and having a building correctly. Well, this is an example of it. This house was substantial. It was built strong. Very little engineering, I'm sure, was done, but that gentleman built a home that could withstand both wind and surge. Now, it was damaged, extensive damage to it, but it survived. Next photos, which you don't have to be concrete to survive. You'll get a kick out of this next one. Right around the corner from the castle is a log cabin home. Why is it that a log cabin home survived and that water was above the eaves on that house? Why did it survive versus all the other wood frame houses around it? That house apparently had been relocated to that location, and it had to do with the density, the strength, the way it was attached to the ground. And again, the water was well over the eaves of that home. So, but the amount of damage from past Christian Storm taught me that, and after I met Scott Sundberg, the first homeowner, Scott started teaching me about construction, in depth on structural. The forces of water are 3 to 4 to 5 times stronger than the forces of wind. And how the homes have been built over the last 50, 60, 70 years has been insufficient to hold the houses down and make sure that you have what they call a continuous load path from the tip of the roof all the way down to the ground, how deep the pilings are. So that is one of the reasons why we started Smart Home America, because I wanted to teach consumers that there is a better way to build, and also wanted to teach the insurance companies, the insurance carriers, the underwriters, and the modelers that it's not how expensive and how pretty the house is, it's how well it's engineered and how well it's constructed that's more important. And countless photos of beautiful buildings that total collapse because the foundation was not significant, or they built the house too low. We have the opposite problem now. We're building the houses too high and they're not strong. They design them for wind, but they do not design them for water and surge. So,
Carl, what are the main 2 or 3 things that we need to look at, right? People move and they're thinking, well, I want those granite countertops, or I want a new designer bathroom or a kitchen. A lot of times they're not thinking about resiliency. I mean, what are those 2 or 3 things that people should think about to build a resilient home?
Good question. Knowing your risk, susceptibility to wildfire, to flood, to hail, to hurricanes, to tornadoes, to surge, to rising water, to riverines. What's your exposure? And how do you build for those conditions? The way you build for a wildfire is totally different than the way you build for a Category 5 hurricane versus a tornado. Totally different. Can we withstand and build to the point that the buildings don't have any damage? No, it's not cost effective. So you have to build it to the best you can. That's why.
Carl, this is an interesting podcast because you have a passion for building better, but then you have like decades of professional experience in insurance. I have to ask you, I mean, the 2004 hurricane season, we saw, I believe, 4 landfalls in Florida. And then 2005, we have Katrina and Rita. I mean, it's just a very hyperactive time. Mm-hmm. How did the insurance industry react to these hyperactive seasons? I mean, what happened?
They pulled out. They pulled back. They non-renewed. They raised rates, and their answer to the insurance problems is to leave. And so what we ended up doing is discovered the IBHS Fortified Home Program and did an aha moment. And we said, well, if we start rebuilding stronger and we document how strong the buildings are, and we have a storm that proves that our theory is correct, it was an aha moment, build it and they will return. And that's exactly what's happened. Alabama now leads the nation in fortified home construction. We've got over 40,000 fortified homes in the Alabama coastal region. We just had the University of Alabama do a report on Hurricane Sally that hit us in 2020, and across the board, fortified homes, which are basically building code standards, but third-party verification with a few little extra items added to it. Those homes perform substantially better, and the insurance losses are substantially less. That has gotten the attention of the insurance industry and the actuaries in the modeling, and we're now seeing fortified take off nationally. And Alabama, with our small coastline, was the example. So we took 2 counties, 40,000 homes to prove that building stronger is smarter.
It sounds like the insurance industry really needed an incentive to come back after pulling away, right? Like, okay, we are going to build better. We're going to learn from our lessons, right?
And it's and other states are taking notice of it. We also added the grant program to encourage existing homes, and that was the other thing. It's not only how do you build new construction, but how do you take existing structures and make them stronger. That's where we worked with the Department of Insurance, state of Alabama, and the legislature, and we passed laws to and gives incentives to help consumers rebuild to a higher standard. And we've re-roofed, it's like 8,000 homes to the fortified standard, giving away over $20 million in grants to consumers to build stronger, and that's worked. And we proved that through the report, through Hurricane Sally Hurricane Report. It's really documented that building stronger is smarter.
Yeah, there's nothing better than a real world test, right? You can test these things in a laboratory, you can have theory, but when we saw Category 2 Sally come in, Sally was interesting because it was moving so slowly. The forward speed was only 2 miles an hour, so we saw these roofs were tested, these buildings were tested for a long time, and it's everything I've heard, the fortified homes did exceptionally well.
Yeah, here's the funny thing about building stronger, though. Mother Nature is going to still try to damage you. It's still going to, what ended up happening is the roof stayed on, the windows stayed in place, the foundations were there, the houses didn't topple. So you drive up to the home and it looked absolutely perfect. You walk in the front door and the ceiling, the carpets were soaking wet. What the heck? The house looks great on the outside. Houses are not submarines. So the water will find a path to get into the home, and the homes that had the quality siding with quality doors that had shuttering systems performed better than those that had the vinyl siding or the plank siding that did not seal up all those joints and cracks. Because of that, we added additional requirements to the building standards so that wouldn't happen in the future. Just because you're fortified, certified, that does not mean you won't have damage. It just means you'll have less damage and you'll be able to return to your home quicker. And it does make a difference. Our tagline, and I've been meaning to tell you this for a while, has been build it higher, drier, safer, smarter, and stronger. So do those things and we can weather most major events. But you've got to be aware that flood is serious. Even up in the Carolinas, that Helena, and you and I talked about this before. It's happened before. That wasn't the first time that area of the country has been flooded, and the wind, and the consumers just didn't know. And this not attitude, but this belief that I've never had a hurricane hit me. Why do I need to build that strong in Tennessee or Kentucky or South Carolina? Well, I've never had a head-on collision, so why do I have seat belts and why do I have airbags? Same logic. None of us would buy a car without them today, but 40 years ago, we didn't understand the importance. Well, the same thing has to happen with construction. We've got to build stronger to avoid the unnecessary claims and losses and impact on life.
Carl, just amazing perspectives there. You're right. I mean, we all want homeowners insurance that covers fire, even if our house hasn't burned before, right? These catastrophes are rare, but we tend to think it won't happen to us, and we see a lot of times it does. Carl, we're already at one of our favorite points in the podcast where we bring up weathered wisdom. So we're going to ask you, when you look back at your life personally or professionally, what is a weather event that influenced you so much it was like, wow, this is the power of Mother Nature? It can be a professional example or a personal example. What is your weathered wisdom, something you've seen that wowed you?
Well, it's when Katrina hit in 2005, my mom got a phone call from the great grandma. She's 98 years at that time. She said, hey, your cousins have lost everything. Can someone please go over there and help them? So what did I do? Get the Penske truck loaded with all the gear that we didn't need, all the generators, ice chests, blankets, sleeping bags, cots, whatever, loaded up and started heading from Alabama into Mississippi on the coast to help our neighbors and families. I crossed over the Mississippi line. And we looked at the pine trees. Well, were the pine trees bent over or were they snapped in half? Well, these were mostly bent over slightly. Oh, that's good. The winds weren't that bad. further we got into Mississippi, crossing over into the Pascagoula area, Moss Point area, I said, wait a second, that shrimp boat shouldn't be where it's at. Where's the bridge? It's missing. Wait a second, that barge shouldn't be there. And I'm talking inland 3-4 miles off the coast. So get all the way over to Biloxi, Mississippi, hop off the interstate, get to my exit to turn to go to my cousin's house. And I look over and there's the sheriff's department. Not a single soul was in sight. And this is the day after Katrina. And I said, this looks strange. And then I noticed that all the police cars were piled up on top of each other. So that's strange. Across the street was the Ford dealership. Cars were stacked up on top of each other.
Wow. And this is all the power of water moving miles inland.
Mm-hmm. And I made the comment to my 16-year-old son that was with me at the time. And I said, if I had been these people's insurance agent, I would have failed them. And he would ask me, what did I mean by that? Well, as an agent, we look at the federal flood maps to determine risk. We look at what the weather scientists give us. We don't know how high a home should be built or not be built.
Sure.
And so we have to rely on the information that's given to help. In that case, I would have said to the Ford dealership, you're 5 miles inland. You don't need flood insurance. Or if I hadn't have said that, I just wouldn't have worried about it because the flood map said you're in an X zone. You're not going to get flooded. Wrong. So because of the lack of information, I was giving bad advice or would have given those consumers bad advice. And ironically, my cousin's home that I went to with that truck, the story is, I went to his house. He's crying his eyes out. He's a physician. He lives in a very nice subdivision. His home was completely destroyed. He knew where all the previous storms surges were from Hurricane Camille and 69, Hurricane George. He knew exactly where the water was going to come up the bluff. His house sat on a ridge 25 feet above. Water went down to the river, North Biloxi River. And early in the morning, the water did not come in gigantic cresting waves. It came in these long, slow moving waves and with a field of debris in front of it. And the water kept on inching closer and closer to the home. And all of a sudden, a wave came crashing through the front of the house, took the whole front wall, all the windows, all his belongings, and put it into the backyard. He and his dog got up on top of the kitchen island, trying to figure out, how do I get inside my attic, not knowing how high the water was going to get. So he survived it. A little bit of humor there on how, but after we unloaded the truck, put all his nasty belongings in that Penske truck to take it back to Alabama to try to salvage what we could, he took me on a tour to all his neighbors' home, and he said, person died there, family spent the night in the attic on that one. Countless people passed away because of not knowing the risk that they were under. They were assuming Katrina was going to be Louisiana. It wasn't going to hurt Mississippi. So technology is something we need to invest in, education, outreach, warning consumers that run from water, hide from the wind. And so that was
that's just a powerful, I mean, when you're mentioning fatalities, and you know what's interesting with Mississippi and Katrina, so many people said, you have people that live there for generations, right? Or at least live there their whole life. And they said, I was here for Category 5 Camille. I know where the water came to. And Katrina, thank God, is only a Cat 3, right? So it's not going to get as high as Camille. And like we say, some people will say Camille killed more people in 2005 than 1969. What they mean is you take away the Camille assumption and people saying, hey, we know it can't get higher than Camille until it did. And unfortunately, you're saying, I mean, it led to homes washing away and even fatalities in that area.
Yeah. To add to that story, I did the story of Scott and his wife on the upside down boat. I can't even imagine the fear that went through them trying to survive that storm. Then my cousin and his experience. And the third one that impacted me, and this is all from one storm, and was one of our clients was referred to us from a Mississippi agent, asked us to help him on some insurance here in Alabama. And I asked him, typical me, how'd you do? How you recovering? How the community? How's your business? How's your family? And I asked the question, did you have anybody pass away in the storm? And he says his answer was yes, my mother. And I said, oh, my word, tell me the story. So in that case, the mother, his sister, and another friend, they had just gotten off, the two ladies had gotten off the shift at the hospital, came to the storm in Waveland, Mississippi to ride out the storm with their mother. Again, not expecting the water to come in as high as it did. The water's coming into the house. It's chest deep. The two young ladies were able to get through the access door in the home into the attic, and they were trying to pull the grandmother up into the attic through the small 2-foot by 2-foot access door. And the daughter lost the grip of the mother's hand. The mother slipped away and ended up drowning in the storm in her own home with her daughter. So the emotional impact as well as the financial and all the other burden. So this is what makes insurance real for me. This is also why I'm passionate about helping consumers understand the exposure they're in and then how to help them build as strong as possible. And realize insurance is just part of the solution. And it gets in the way of a lot of times because we hear it all the time from consumers. I'm spending too much money. I can't afford it. My house has never been damaged. And so it's a constant tug of war battle of educating and teaching and warning. And some people listen, some don't. So, but you talk about impact, the impact on a community and their ability to recover and recover well. Katrina will always go down as that storm, just like Galveston, just like Katrina or Camille in '69. These storms have names of people that passed away, but we don't need to forget.
Yeah, Carl, and I love your passion to educate folks. You know, for you, it's not just insurance, it's not just business, it's really getting to the people. And what you're sharing here are these ways that communities are changed forever. You know, when someone can drive down the street and see the different people that passed away or were displaced or moved away and never come back. I mean, a whole community can completely change forever in a day in these high magnitude storms. Just wanted to thank you for your passion to educate and engage. I mean, you've been doing that all along the Gulf Coast. I've seen you at so many workshops from Florida to Mississippi to Alabama. You're there, you're present, you're engaged, and your passion is really education. And I wanted to thank you for that. And thank you also for coming on the podcast. Our listeners, I think, are going to get a ton out of this message that you shared today. Carl, how can people find you and the work you're doing? I know you've been involved with Smart Home America, IBHS. I mean, if people want to learn more, what can they do?
Well, two ways. They can contact me at Schneider Insurance out of Mobile, Alabama, and I'm just starting up a brand new website called Build It Fortified. My whole objective there is just provide education, information. How do you build strong, whether it's on the coast or not? I'm also working very closely with the insurance industry on fortified commercials. So it's not just residents and homes and beach houses. It's also how do we protect the infrastructure of our businesses. So I'm working on a lot of research there, working with the cement industry. But follow me on builditfortified.com and just reach out to me anyway, and we'll go from there.
Carl, can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. I'm hoping it's a light hurricane season for our residents along the Gulf Coast, but if it's not, where communities are impacted, I think they can be a lot better prepared by listening to your directives and your perspectives on these important issues. And what I got from this podcast too is it's not just business, it's not just commerce. For some of these communities, it really can be an issue of life or death. You have to know your risk, not just from wind, but also from the water.
To add something funny to that story, tell them a story about Hurricane Michael and someone calling you in the middle of the storm there, Hal.
I'm glad you brought this up as we close out. So I got to know you in 2018 through that summer, and we met each other. And then a couple months later, I was in Mexico Beach, Florida, ground zero for Category 5 Hurricane Michael storm surge, just catastrophic damage. I was in Mexico Beach the night before it got destroyed, and I was on the phone with you, and you said, "What in the world are you doing there?" I was looking for a parking garage, some way I could get up. I couldn't find it. I did find a hotel stairway, a concrete stairway that I thought about riding it in. That would have been terrifying. That hotel was just gutted. Talking to you, taking your advice, I ended up going a little farther northwest into Panama City proper, which was a lot safer. I ended up coming back with your son over to Mexico Beach by the Air Force Base there a couple days later, and I had never seen damage like that. It was just completely moonscaped. But partly through your advice, encouraging me, get the heck out of there. What are you doing? Just 12 hours before that surge hit. So
and we also had to send Hal some gasoline and some dollar bills because ATMs don't work and gas pumps don't work.
Yeah, that was an interesting storm, and I'll never forget that field work afterwards. I know y'all came over to my rescue and whatnot. But yeah, that was a powerful storm, and I remember we were talking throughout it.
Well, for those that don't know, Hal Needham is a special person. He's important to me. The research, the information that he provides, the way Hal provides information is unique. Yes, visited with Hal in Galveston. I've been following him now, 6-7 years. Incredible research he does, and it's imperative that we help Hal get this message out. He's been a true friend and a scholar in all his information. Hats off to you.
Thanks, Carl. I can't say enough about you as well. I'm excited to keep following you and what you're doing professionally. And I just want to thank you personally for all the encouragement you've given me through the years. You know, to be honest, I would not be here. You really connected me with CNC, and out of that came the GeoTrek project. So take you out of the mix. Honestly, there may not be a GeoTrek podcast. So that's just how one person can influence another and change the course of history in someone's life. I know you changed my life and many others as well. So thanks for your friendship, and thanks so much for taking time to come on the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Hal.